And let me turn on my camera for a second so you guys can see the person behind the voice. So my name is John Meredith, and again, I'm your instructor for this session. Today, we're going to talk about Cloud SIEM administration. So we're going to look at the Cloud SIEM product. Again, SIEM standing for Security, Information, and Event Management. And we're going to look at this product rather from an administrator's perspective. So we're going to talk about how to allow people access to it. We're going to talk about how we get data into it. How we do all that fun stuff. And then we'll also talk about some various roles. So I'm going to get into that in just a little bit. Again, I'm up here in Bedford, New Hampshire, up in New England. I am an instructor here with Sumo Logic, trainer here. I have been with Sumo 2 years. So I don't think I mentioned that in the previous classes, but like I said, I've been with Sumo 2 years. And otherwise, like I said, I'm glad to have you here. My plea, of course, is mentioned as previous classes is, if you've got a question, please ask it. Okay, we want to hear your questions. We want to hear what's important to you. So don't be bashful about asking questions. Additionally, in this class, I have helping me Odell. So Odell, do you want to say hi?
Good morning, everyone. Welcome and good luck, and have a good class today. John has a lot of information for you, so be prepared to soak it all up.
Okay. So that being said, I've turned off my camera just to save some bandwidth here, and we will get this party started. So our focus, you may recall yesterday we talked about the SIEM solution. We talked about the data pipeline. We're going to review that, but we're going to live that. We are actually going to log into the Cloud SIEM. We're going to explore the UI from an administrator's perspective this time, not so much from a user's perspective, although there is a little overlap there. And then we're going to talk about how we get data into Sumo Logic, and we're going to do a lab on that. And you're going to find that when we first enable some records to come into Sumo Logic, that without mapping, log mapping and ingest mapping, those records are basically going to get rejected. So one of the other things we're going to have to do is do some mapping here. We're going to have to do some mapping and define what fields we want, and what those fields are, and how they map to our metadata. So that's going to be a bit of a conversation point. And then we'll typically take a break. And then we'll talk about customizing, tuning, and administering our Cloud SIEM environment. And so we're going to talk about creating some rules, some additional rules. Remember, I mentioned yesterday, we talked about how to create a match rule. Well, today we'll talk about a threshold rule and a chain rule. We'll also talk about how we can modify the custom action buttons. And then, as before, as the last 2 days, we're also going to give you an opportunity to take the certification exam with us here. And so if you get stuck on a question, you can ask us and we'll try to help you with that question. But the bottom line is we're trying to help you get certified in Sumo. And so again, just a reminder, these classes are free. The certification exams are free. So you can come in here and play and have yourselves a great time. Okay. So what do you say we get to it? Again, the Cloud SIEM product is a security tool that allows us at the enterprise level to see what's happening with regards to our security and operational issues. We saw this yesterday. And again, for some of you who weren't with me yesterday, you'll see it here in just a little bit. But basically, as you know, we take lots and lots of records, maybe thousands of records. We ingest those records. We pull out the various fields from those records, those logs and stuff that we need. And then we pull out those logs, and then we look to see if any of those records match any of the built-in rules that we have. And if they do, then we extract out the entity, and then we correlate based on the entity. We correlate the signals, and if there's a significant enough score over a 2-week period of time, that generates for us an insight. And you'll see this in just a few minutes. We're going to go through it. So thanks. Thanks for joining, Peter. Make sure everybody's got mics enabled. Excellent. Good. So let's get to it here. So this is the process that happens. Okay. I'll share the login details when I'm ready to share the login details. Thank you very much. I got it. Okay. So we're going to sit there and go through our normal collection process. And this is the collection process that we have in Sumo. Okay. Same deal with collection and ingestion. But this time, we as administrators, we're going to have to play in this area. So we're going to talk about this a little bit more. Then once we get those messages in here, then we'll also have to write some parsing and mapping rules so that it knows which fields to extract and how to extract them. And that's going to generate our records. We'll also enrich them as well. We'll look them up through CrowdStrike to see if the IP address, for example, is a known threat, that sort of thing. And then, like I said, it generates our records. Then from our records, we are going to take those records and compare them against all of our built-in rules. So we at Sumo have created a bunch of built-in rules based on the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So we've got several hundred rules built into the system that we have. And so if the record matches the rule, i.e. somebody is trying to change my firewall settings, or somebody's logging in with a previously deleted account or something like that, that's going to generate a signal. Now, in that signal, when we take that record and we're going to pull out the entity, that entity could be the user ID, it could be the host name, it could be the IP address, something indicates who. And then what we're going to do is we're going to compare all these signals, correlate them by entities. And so if these signals, and each of these signals, by the way, has a value, has a score. And if the score of these signals over a 2-week period is greater than or equal to 12, then we will generate an insight automatically. Now, what does this mean to you? This means that we're going to save you lots of fatigue. If you're a SOC analyst, we're automatically going to ingest this, go through this process, do this fun stuff, everything here. And it's going to generate insights for you that you can then focus on. Okay. So that's the goal here of what we're doing and why we're doing it. We want to save you fatigue and make it easy for you to understand where the problems are. And again, I forgot to click the animated slides here as it goes through and highlights the various things. My apologies. Okay. As I said, in this class, we're going to focus on this collection process because we as administrators, Cloud SIEM administrators, will be setting up our ingestion. Okay. So what kind of data are we ingesting? Well, interestingly enough, it can fall into a couple different categories, right? Typically, you'll take your CloudTrail logs if you want, your CloudWatch logs, all kinds of things. But we obviously need to have lots of records to be able to create insights. So your firewall logs, various other things that you might want. If we're not generating insights, we may need to consider adding more data, more logs and stuff to our Cloud SIEM. You might have too much data, right? You can see you're getting lots and lots of things. As you probably know, I hope you all know that we at Sumo Logic don't charge you by how many users you have or how many queries you run. We charge you by ingesting and storing. So the more you ingest, the more you store, the more cost goes up. So, and you can obviously create different partition levels and stuff like that to improve your cost management. But the point is that you might have too much data. And again, all the data you bring into Sumo Logic may or may not be going into this Cloud SIEM product. So you direct what you want to go to the Cloud SIEM product. So again, we want, again, data quality matters. I think that goes without saying, right? We want to grab the stuff that's important, right? Your guard duty logs, your CloudTrail logs, your CloudWatch logs, your Windows logs. And so one of the things that will happen is typically when you get the Cloud SIEM product, we will help you look at your data and figure out, get you some good data here coming in here, pick the best data sources. We will help you go forward with us. Okay. And then of course, once you get the data, we've got to parse it out, right? We're going to read the logs. For example, here we have an example where we have an IP address, but it's got dashes instead of dots. Well, we'll take that, we'll parse it out, we'll translate it to an IP address. We recognize it as an IP address, we'll translate it, and we'll map it to our metadata field. So again, we give it a specific name, in this case, source device IP, right? Alex@travellogic.com, that's probably gonna be the user ID or user email, excuse me. So we will take these information, we will parse them, we will map them, and then we'll enrich them. We'll look at CrowdStrike and see, gee, is there a threat level associated with this IP address? And that then generates our records. From our records, we're going to compare them against our rules. As I mentioned, we've got a bunch of built-in rules, hundreds of built-in rules that you can use. And as I mentioned yesterday, and we'll mention again today, you can create your own rules for specific situations in your company and in your data. If it does match the rule, we'll extract out the entity, the IP address, the host name, the username. And we'll call that a signal. So a signal is something that's, not right, something that we want to bring your attention to. Then we're going to correlate those signals by the entity. And like I said, each of these signals get scored based on the rule. The rules also have associated score with them. And when that score of those signals adds up or is equal to or greater than 12, we will then automatically generate an insight over a 2-week period of time. And that makes it easy for you then to focus on what you need to focus on. You don't have to look at all these records. You don't have to look at all these signals. You can look directly at the insights and go from there. Now, there are some things we're going to use in the Sumo Logic user interface. There are some things we're going to do in the Cloud SIEM user interface. And so we need to talk about that. As an administrator, these are things we need to talk about. So one of the things that we need to do here is we need to deal with role-based access control, RBAC, role-based access control. The security model that we use at Sumo is we create a user account. A user account consists of a user first name, last name, email address, and then the role that they're assigned to. The roles are where we assign privileges and what you can and cannot do. So I'm going to stop the slide for a second. I'm sure it's probably annoying you with the motion and stuff. And I'm going to go in here. So I am an administrator in Sumo Logic. And as far as Cloud SIEM or Sumo is concerned, here under administration, here under users and roles are where we create our user accounts, where we create our roles. Okay. So if I want to create a new user, I click on the new user button. You will see I don't add but 4 things: first name, last name, email, and then what role do I want them to have? Now I can have them have more than one role, and the permissions are the union of more than one role. Okay. So that's pretty simple. Now, obviously what we want to do is take our users, like our administrators, add their accounts and assign them to the admin role. By the way, speaking of admin role, out of the box, Sumo Logic has 2 built-in roles: administrator and analyst. Okay. Administrator has rights to do things, bring collectors, bring data in, all that stuff. Analyst has rights to run the queries and do that sort of thing. But you can, I can, we can create other roles for whatever we want. We could create, for example, I can go in here and add a role, and maybe I'm going to call this role SOC Analyst Level 1. Okay. And I could put a description in here if I want to. Now in here, I can also automatically filter so they can only see some specific data. So when I create a role, I can also filter it down so that I can see specific data. Typically for our SOC and Cloud SIEM environment, we don't worry about that, but for other things, for example, maybe I've got my financial team and I want them to be able to run reports and stuff and see my financial information. And I only want them to be able to access the financial stuff. So I could create a search filter in here that says only they can see the financial data. Okay. So it automatically restricts. Now, here's where I get into my capabilities and things like that. If you've noticed, if those of you have played around and you've logged in as training analyst, and if you've ever looked and wanted to install a collector, you'll see that our training analyst role, the accounts we used yesterday and the day before, can view collectors, but they don't have the permissions to manage collectors. And so in this, I can go in here and decide what permissions I want them to have. And some of these are latched. So for example, if I give somebody the ability to manage collector, they automatically get view collector. So we go in here and we decide what permissions, what things they need. Specifically to Cloud SIEM, if I go down here at the very bottom, here's where I can say they can view the Cloud SIEM Enterprise. Notice right here in my navigation pane, and again, if the navigation pane isn't open, and I realize, right now you haven't logged in, you can't see this yet unless you're looking at your company's environment. But I have the option here, it says Cloud SIEM Enterprise. You might have Cloud SIEM Enterprise enabled by us. We've enabled it for you, but you don't have permissions to see it. In order to have this option here, I've got to check mark this. And that gives you the ability to view and see the Cloud SIEM environment. Now, in viewing the Cloud SIEM environment, what do we want you to be able to do as far as insights, right? Do we want you to be able to put comments on insights, be able to create insights, delete insights, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? So we can decide what permissions and stuff that you need here. As far as content, and again, I'll talk about content and configuration, but let me do this real quick. Let me go into the Cloud SIEM environment. Here is my content. Here is my content, and here is my configuration. So all of these options that are available here are controlled by, just give me a second here to go back to my Cloud SIEM environment. Go back to my role here. Actually, I'll just edit a role real quick just to do it right. There we go. I'm going to edit the role. So here on these roles is where I decide what things under content you have the ability to do and what things under configuration you have the ability to do. Now, just so we're clear, I am a member of this role, the administrator role. I have full rights in the Sumo Logic environment. So when I go into my Cloud SIEM environment, I can see all these options, okay? For this class, you're going to log in as a training plus admin user, and we'll talk about that in a second, but you're not going to see all these options. Why? Because for this class, you're a member of this training plus admin role. So we've watered down some of the permissions here to make it a little easier and make it a little succinct. But you can create whatever roles you want, and you can define the permissions that those roles are going to have. That's role-based access control. And then you assign the users to these roles. Any questions about that? Okay. No limit on how many roles you create, no limit on how many users you have. Okay. All right. So that's the conversation. And again, that is done inside of Sumo. That is done inside of Sumo, not the Cloud SIEM environment. It's done here. Okay. So theoretically, if you wanted to, you can create tier 1 and tier 2 SOC analysts, provide them certain rights and privileges, maybe create a role for that, create a tier 3 SOC analyst and SOC admin and provide them roles and configurations for that. So again, you take your users, you assign them to roles, those roles have their permissions. Okay. As I mentioned before, you've got this configuration menu, and again, the configuration gear icon right over here is where we can do various things. So for example, we can integrate and say, where's our data coming from Sumo Logic? From the Sumo Logic data collection. We can modify our context actions. You may recall yesterday when we looked at things like our IP address or entity, there was that 6-dotted context action button. You can change that. Also, when you look at an insight, and I'll show you this in a minute, you can actually modify the actions associated with that. Over here under workflow, you can control, remember we talked about new, in progress, closed. You can control the workflow here, what the options are for your workflow. You can customize all that, okay? Yeah, Jacob mentions in here, that FYI, anybody in the default admin role will be able to see all SIEM events. So again, you want to be careful there about who has your default admin role. So Jacob, you're absolutely correct. And then Thomas also points out, he says, I don't have user role options, only account shows up in below administration. That's true. We can also control who has the ability to go into users and roles. So you may or may not have that. So again, that's why I'm showing you this, because when you guys log in, you're not going to be able to play with this. Okay. So that's why I took the time to show you how that stuff works. Again, also besides your configuration menu, you've got your content menu. Here's where we can add our rules, rule tuning. And you may recall, those of you in yesterday's class, you only had rules, rule tuning, and custom insight. While I had all of these things, I could actually modify my match list. I could create threat intelligence information. I could block certain network information. I can do all kinds of stuff. So there's a lot to this tool. Okay. So the training accounts, right? The training accounts are members of our training administrative role, and we have watered down your permissions a little bit. So you can see basically what you need to see for the purposes of this class. So you'll see have limited access to configuration, you have limited access to content, but you'll be able to do the things we want to do in this class. Hey, Peter, I forgot, are you my helper today?
Yes, I'm happy. Correct.
You're helping us out, right?
Yes.
Did you want to introduce yourself, sir?
Yes, hello. My name is Peter Walker. I'm a customer success engineer with Sumo Logic. Just sitting in the background, trying to help you as you ask questions on the chat. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. And Peter, where are you located?
I'm located in San Mateo, California.
Very good. So it's a little early for you. Thanks for being here. All right. So my point, though, is as I'm going through this, is some of the controls are in the Sumo Logic user interface, and some of them are in the Cloud SIEM user interface. So in the Sumo Logic interface, this is where we set up our collection. This is where we grab our data and we bring it in. This is also where we can write field extraction rules, and I'll talk about those in a little bit. Also, this is where we configure our partitions and our data tiers. All right, we've got a continuous data tier and infrequent data tier, and we charge differently based on which data you put in the data tier. So the point is you can configure and partition your data if you want to. Now, writing field extraction rules, configuring partitions and stuff like that, we teach that in our normal administration class. We don't typically teach it here. It's not something that a lot of Cloud SIEM administrators probably want or need to do. As far as forwarding data to the Cloud SIEM, oh yeah, that's something we're going to talk about here. It's something I expect you to be able to do. We'll show you how to do that. We'll also show you how to add data sources here. We already have a collector ready for us to use that we can do this. And then as far as configuring your users and roles, I showed you where we can do that, where we can configure those users and roles. All of this is in the Sumo Logic user interface. Now, as far as administration from the Cloud SIEM environment, we need to configure our log and ingest mappings. So even though we're sending logs into Cloud SIEM, we need to tell it what to do with that data, which fields are important, how to digest those fields. We can also create custom context rules, match list, and insights. That's under content. We can also customize our actions, our context actions, and various other workflows. That's in our configuration. So again, some of this you do in the Sumo Logic UI, some of this you do in the Cloud SIEM UI. Now, one thing I do want to mention to you before I get into the hands-on labs. For those of you who weren't with me yesterday or the day before, if you were to go into Sumo Logic, and if you were to go into help, you'll see there's this link here called community. Or you can also get to community by clicking on this house, clicking on the certification tab, excuse me, I'm sorry, learn tab. And then down here at the bottom, there is a little link to the community. But you can also get there, by the way, if you want to, since you guys don't have access to the Sumo Logic environment, by going to support.sumologic.com and clicking on community. Why do I want you to go to community, and what's the big deal? As those of you who were with me yesterday and Tuesday know, if we do a search for the word slides in community, we will get this link. And I'm going to copy this link and I'm going to put it in the chat box just so you guys all have it. The point is, for all of our certification classes, we have links to our lab guide, we have links to our recording of these classes, and we have links to the slides. Now, I have to tell you, in the last couple of days, and I didn't realize this, because, for example, when we first did this way back when we put the fundamental slides up here, it takes us to a product called SlideShare. And with SlideShare, we used to be able to download these very, very easy without having to sign up or any of this stuff. So it's been pointed out to me in the last 2 days, this is complicated. This is painful. So we will make a point of moving this information to probably our learning management system. So in the weeks, month ahead, we will probably take this information and put it into our LMS to make it easier for you to grab. But here is where you can listen to our recordings, look at our slides, see our labs. Speaking of the labs, for this class, we have a PDF. Oh, Angel, they may actually use a credit card too. Ooh, that's bad. Okay, thank you for letting us know, Angel. When we first did this, they didn't have any of that stuff. And last thing we wanted to do is put you guys at risk. So I know a couple of you have mentioned it in an email to us. And so it's something we're going to probably resolve here very quickly. So they've changed things on us, and therefore, again, it's not us, it's SlideShare. And we'll move this stuff where people can get it access to it easily. Now, I happen to have a copy of today's lab guide. So I am uploading that lab guide now. It's in the chat box, and you should be able to pull it down from the chat box. If your company does not allow you to grab files through the chat box, please send us an email. Okay? Please send us an email, or please send us your email address, put it in the chat box, send it to the host and participants, and we will email it to you. Now, so Dan asked a really good question here. Also, if you want to, you can email Odell and he will send it to you. Although Odell, I think you misspelled your last name, buddy, in that email chat. Dan asked a really good question in the chat box. Which of these classes in the administrator that covers collectors, data sources, field extraction rules, partitions, etc.? If it's not covered today, that is part of the administration certification class. That is exactly where it is. And Dan, I'll even try to make it easy for you, okay? If you go down here and we look, and if I find the administration class, bear with me, there it is. You can, like I said, listen to the recording of these classes. You can actually listen to a recording of this, just play it right here. And again, there's slides and all that fun stuff and labs that you can go ahead and you can access, which is why I give you this link, and why this link should help you out. I realize that SlideShare has made this very complicated. Okay. The other thing I would mention to you all, and that is if we go to our public facing Sumo Logic site, and again, if I go in here and in here under resources, down in our resources, there's a learn section. And here in our learn section, you can see where and when classes are being offered. So, for example, you can see, for example, here, maybe when the administration class is being offered. Hang on a second, not seeing it. The other thing I want to mention to you is in our LMS, our learning management system. So how you get there is you go into Sumo Logic, and again, we'll get you into Sumo Logic in a minute, but you go into here, you go into home, you go into certification, you click get certified. And here we have the ability for you and I to become a Sumo Logic expert. And almost all of our classes are self-paced. So under observability, which is where our admin class is, maybe. Thought it would be in here, hang on. Let's try general. There we go. Under general, here's our administration self-paced class. So bottom line is that there's lots of ways for you to learn. And I'm going to throw in one more. If you want to learn how to create collectors and data sources and stuff like that, all you have to do is go out to YouTube, do a search on Sumo Logic. You'll see we've got a channel out there. We've got a bunch of 5 to 10 minute micro learnings out there on how to set up a collector and how to set up a source and all that fun stuff. So we will show you that today. But obviously things like field extraction rules and stuff, there's another video out there that you can watch, or like I said, you can do this self-paced course, whatever you need to do, okay? Okay. So Michael Z asked a really good question here. In a year when these certifications expired, is the recertification process for us to go through again, to taking these certs again or something else. It's the same certification process. What we expect to have happen though, is we expect to have more features, more things. And so that's why basically your certifications are good for a year with the exception of fundamentals. Fundamentals are good for 2 years. So all of the certs are good for 1 year except for fundamentals. And we expect in that year, we've made changes, we've made enhancements, we've made new features, we've made whatever. And that's why we ask you to do this. Now, having been at Sumo for 2 years, there are some classes that have added new features. There are some classes that haven't. This year, our focus has been adding new courses, the Cloud SIEM courses, the Cloud SIEM Fundamentals and Advanced, and also our observability fundamentals and our observability administration class. So, and I said Cloud SIEM Advanced, I meant Cloud SIEM Administration, sorry. So hopefully, Michael, that answers your question. Thanks for asking. All right. So that takes care of the housekeeping. What do you say we log in and we put some stuff here to practice and we play around? Now, I mentioned to you before that I didn't want you to log in. I don't want to grab accounts. But now you're going to log in with a different account. You're going to log in as training plus admin with a 3-digit number at sumologic.com. Those of you who used the 3-digit number yesterday and you logged in as training plus analyst, you can use that same number. So in the chat box, I would like you to type in whatever 3-digit number that you want, right? So type in whatever 3-digit number you want, and then you're going to go to service.sumologic.com in Google Chrome. You're going to log in as training plus admin with that 3-digit number at sumologic.com. That's the email. And then the password is currently capital NEW, capital YEAR, 22 exclamation mark. And that password will change on February 7th. It changes on the first Monday of every month. And as I mentioned yesterday, I don't know what the new password's going to be. Okay. But if you want to reach out to me, I will gladly tell you what the password is once we change it. This is an open system that you can use. And I am putting my contact information in here. So in case you want to reach out to me, you can. And I typically get about 5 requests every month. People asking me about the new password. That's fine. So again, you guys are all grab numbers. So let's put this into practice. Let me stop my slides here for just a second. And let me go out to my Sumo Logic environment here real quick if I can get something here out of my way. There, oops. Oh, I know why. There we go. That'll help. Okay. All right. So here in my Sumo Logic, let me log out. And let me go through this exercise myself. So again, you're going to log in as training plus admin with a 3-digit number. Again, and those of you who've been in class with me before, I know I like 603. 603 is the area code for New Hampshire. Okay. And so at sumologic.com is the username. And again, the password is capital NEW, whoops, excuse me, capital NEW, capital YEAR, 22, numeral 2, numeral 2, exclamation mark. And you should be able to log in. And you should be able to see things. Now, again, you're logging in with a different account, which has some additional permissions and things like that, that you can see. And so what I'd like you to do is when you get logged in, I'd like you, and by the way, I want you to log in here. Do not go into the Cloud SIEM tool yet. Do not. Don't need to go there yet. If you accidentally do click on this to get back to the Sumo Logic core platform, it's this icon up here in the corner. So if you need to get back, you click on that, click on Continuous Intelligence Platform. But we're going to play in this area first. I'm going to talk about this. Okay. So what I'd like you to do, like I said, is I'd like you to raise your hands. Thank you, Adele, for putting that information in. Glenda, it's cute. Thank you. And so let me know that you're logged in. So raise your hand when you're all logged in, and we don't want to leave anybody behind. So I've got about half the class logged in. 32 people are logged in out of 61. I'll give it a few more seconds. If you're having problems logging in, please reach out. Let us know. Okay. If you get a message that says, please validate your credentials, try a different number. Okay. So whatever works. All right. So it looks like everybody wants to be logged in. I'm going to assume it is logged in. Great. So let me lower the attendees' hands. And as I mentioned here in the core Sumo product here, okay, great. In the core Sumo product, let's talk about some of those user interface things that we talked about. I already talked about the role-based controls. By the way, I'm going to log out as 603, and I'm going to log in with my account because I said my account has much more permissions, just to be fair here. So here under administration, as I said before, is maybe you'll see account, and you can see account information about your environment. Here's our users and roles. Again, maybe you have permissions to that, maybe you don't. I don't think you guys do. Here's where I would create my users and roles. And then also under here, there's some security settings dealing with Sumo logic as a whole. Nothing really for the Cloud SIEM. The other area that's important for you all in the Cloud SIEM admin class is this manage data. So if you click on manage data, you'll see under here is my collections. Here are my collectors. Now, we have two types of collectors, hosted collectors and installed collectors. Okay, hosted collectors and installed collectors. A hosted collector is if you're in a cloud environment. So if you're on AWS, Azure, Google Cloud Platform, or if you're using software as a service products like Office 365 or whatever, that's a hosted collector. We maintain that collector. We take care of that collector. You don't have to worry about that collector. It's on us, okay? The installed collectors are things that you would have to install yourself. And up here is where you would add a installed collector. So when I add a collector, you'll see I can add an installed collector or a hosted collector. Now, we have already taken the liberty for this class of installing a collector. It's a hosted collector. It's called Admin Training SIEM. It's the first one listed here. And by the way, underneath these triangles are my various sources, the sources of data that I want to bring in, my CloudTrail logs, my CloudWatch metrics, my inventory logs, my CloudWatch log, whatever. You can see the various logs and sources and metrics and stuff that you bring in here. That's what these sources are. So one of the things that we're going to have to do is we're going to have to create a source. In fact, if I jump over here, I'm going to jump to lab 2. Okay, so in our PDF book that you all have access to, I'm going to jump to lab 2 here for a second. I will go into the user interface in just a bit, but I want to jump to lab 2. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're in the continuous intelligence platform, which is the Sumo core product. And in here, we want to find our training admin SIEM collector, which is that first one. And we are going to add a source. Okay. So go back here. The way you add a source, there's an option right there to add a source. Vincent, I'm not sure if there's a question there or you're just raising your hands, tell me you're logged in. So if there's questions, feel free to let us know. And again, if you have problems logging in, please let us know. So here, I want you and I to click add source. Now, because this is a hosted environment, lots of sources we can add here. HTTP logs and metrics, Cloud syslog, Office 365 audit, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Lots of different source types that we can add here. Stuff specifically from AWS. Now, for our Cloud SIEM environment, what we want to do is we want to bring in our HTTP logs and metrics. That's what we want to select. This first one, HTTP logs and metrics. So when you click on this, you get to give it a name, okay? And per the directions, we are going to name it HTTP training data with your initials. So Case doesn't make any difference, but that's okay. And I'm going to put my initials in here. Okay. Now you could put a description in here if you want to. You could even define the source host if you want to. You don't have to worry about it. Leave that stuff blank. The source category is something that we do suggest. And what we're going to do here is we're going to type in the word training with our initials. So for our source category, I'm going to type in training with our initials. Okay. That way we can see I can look at each individual source category. Now, here's the big piece. If I want this data to go to our Cloud SIEM environment, I'm going to check mark this SIEM processing. By checking this checkbox, I'm now going to forward this log data not only to Sumo Logic Core product here, but I'm also going to forward it to the Cloud SIEM environment. And that's something that you need to do. Check mark that value. You should be able to add, yes, you should be able to add a source. You should be able to follow along, Michael. Now, make sure you're logged in as training plus admin with that 3-digit number, not training plus analyst. If you're logged in as training plus analyst, log out, log in with training plus admin with that 3-digit number at sumologic.com. Same password. Yes, you should be able to follow along. Thanks, Odell. All right. So I'm going to pause here for a second, give everybody a chance to catch up. Again, those that want to follow along. Now, when we add a source, we can also, if we want to, add additional fields and metadata. So, for example, maybe this is data coming from CloudTrail, and I may want to say, create a metadata tag called data source, and then specify this is CloudTrail or whatever. You can add metadata tags if you want to be able to search for those tags. That's the reason that we have this. Again, I'm not going to take advantage of this. I'm going to let it go. I'm going to close it into trash can. So again, I've check marked this down here. Additionally, I can control what I want to use for a timestamp. I'm going to take the timestamp for my logs. I'm going to use the default settings here. One other little thing down here is processing rules. Processing rules. You and I can add a rule. We won't in this case, but I'll explain what it is. You and I can add a rule, and based on some sort of an expression, could be a regular expression, could be parse anchor, could be whatever, but some expression that says when we find these fields, we may want to include them, exclude them, hash them, mask them. The reason these processing rules exist is that when we ingest log data into Sumo, maybe there's some information for HIPAA compliance or whatever we don't want to see. Maybe patient IDs, maybe credit card numbers, things like that. We want to mask that stuff out. So you can create these processing rules as you ingest this. This is not a Cloud SIEM thing. This is a Sumo Logic thing across all of our products, across all of our sources. So that's why that exists. So you can filter things out, mask things out to make sure you're compliant with whatever. And again, Stephen, I'm not sure if there's a question there. If there is, feel free to ask it, put it in the chat box, unmute your mic, whatever. Or you're just telling me you're logged in. So thanks. So let me recap here real quick. Again, we added a name in this source. We gave it a source category and we checked this checkbox. Everything else is by default. Then we're going to go down to the bottom and we're going to click save. Hang on, let's see what gets in the chat box. Okay. So Stephen asked a question, can you use the processing rules to edit logs as they come in through the ingest volume? You sure could. Yes, you could exclude things. Yes, Stephen, you could do that if you wanted to. Yep. So yeah, good question. So basically what I want us all to do is take this that we've created and hit save. Okay. And it says, apparently I already have a source with that name. So I will actually put today's date in here, 01/27. So it has a different name. And okay, good. Now it gives us the source address. Now, normally I would ask you to copy the source address and paste it someplace and store it someplace, but we're going to come back and I'll show you how you can get it back later. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK and just close this up for right now. Now in our Cloud Training Sim admin, now you'll notice we got a whole bunch of different sources in here, and that's great. Glad to have it. Okay, so this is good. In fact, here's mine. Actually, looks like I must have double clutched on mine, or somebody created another one. But here is mine that I created. Now, let me see if we're all set here. Yep. So good. Now, one other thing before I get into the, so we've basically defined a source to be able to ingest our data. Okay. And in the labs, we're going to go ahead and process that and go forward and all that fun stuff. But for right now, I also want to show you here under my managed data, under logs, here is where our field extraction rules are. And I don't really want to get into field extraction rules much other than to say that when we ingest data into Sumo logic, we can pre-parse fields. Now, if your logs are of JSON type, if the data type is JSON, you don't have to worry about field extraction rules. We automatically pre-parse and make those fields available in JSON logs. We do that automatically. But if it's another type, then you may want to pre-parse those fields out and give it a specific name. You may want to, or you may not want to. You don't have to in this case, but you can, I can, we can do that. And if you don't mind, I'm going to show you an example here. So where it says demo FER, if I click on these three ellipses, the more action button, and I click edit, what's going on here when I receive data from our lab/Apache/access, I write these, we have these expressions that parse out the source IP, the method, the URL, the status code, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that when I look at my data in Sumo logic, just humor me for a second. When I look at my data in Sumo logic, I will then see these fields in my field browser. And that's basically what it does. It pre-parses them and makes these fields available. Now, as I said, if your log types, like your CloudTrail logs, are in JSON, so if I look at some CloudTrail data here, we automatically take any JSON logs and we automatically parse out all the fields. So you don't have to use field extraction rules for JSON. Okay. So that's the big deal with field extraction logs. And we talk more about this, of course, in the admin class. But for this class, you don't have to worry about doing any field extraction rules or anything like that. I'm just mentioning it to you because it was talked about in a slide. Okay. So we have now created the ability to bring in some data into our Cloud SIEM environment. And really all we have to do, if you've got some existing data in your Cloud SIEM environment, is you have to open up the source and you have to check this checkbox, and now we'll go into Cloud SIEM as well. Now, not all of our sources have this checkbox. So it's one of them. So maybe you might have to create and add a new source for HTTP logs and metrics. Okay. All right. Now, let's take a look before I go on to the next lab and all that stuff. Let's take a look at Cloud SIEM Enterprise. Okay. Okay. So Dan asked a really good question here. Do you have to define an additional level of field definition to harmonize fields from different logs? So good question, Dan. Excellent question. Okay. When you do your field extraction rules, you decide what the field name is going to be called. All right. So for example, maybe your company wants to standardize on client IP as the IP address, right? So you can define a field name, client IP, and when you parse out from different logs that IP address, you can make sure it's all referred to as client IP. So that's a good example of using field extraction rules, but that's something that you have to control. Whatever your standard field names are, when you create those field extraction rules, you use those field names. Okay, so there's nothing that automatically does this. This is something you manually have to control. So Dan, I hope that answers your question. Okay. Is there a schema so that the extracted rules match the Sumo logic rules? There, as far as the schema goes, and as far as these field names, we can call these field names whatever we want to, and then we can reference them by those field names. And then somebody could also, when they create a query, they could parse out the value and call it a different field name. So this is where, again, you've got to control this. Now, what you can do, what I can do, what we can do is we can go into manage data, we can go into logs, and here under fields, I can see all the various field names and things that we've extracted, and whether it's being done through a field extraction rule, or it's being done by a partition, or it's being done through a collector. So you can see where things are being created. Okay. Where these fields are coming from.
Those are the places where the fields are being used, actually.
Okay, those sounds good. The fields are being used. Thank you. So again, it's up to you how you manage that as a company. All right. So let me get back to my slides here for a second. And actually, no, let me go back in here to Sumo for a second. And what I want us all to do is I want us to go into the Cloud SIEM enterprise product. By the way, we're going to take a break here in about 15 minutes. So when we go into the Cloud SIEM enterprise environment, this is, of course, our Cloud SIEM environment. Those of you in my class yesterday know all the various bits and pieces and stuff in here. Now, I'm going to explain this from an administrator's perspective, not so much an end user. So I'm not going to worry too much about this. But basically what I'm looking at here is a time range across this heads-up display. That time range is controlled by this switch. And so when I'm looking at values and things like that, it's based on this time range. So I can see I've ingested 24,000 records in the last 24 hours, and that's down a little bit. I've ingested, from that 24,000 records, I've generated 23,000 signals, and I've generated 4 insights. Okay. And I can see what the status of my insights and stuff are, and I can see the timeline of when things got created. Over here, like I said, is my heads up display. I can see this out of circle, all of my ring, and this does automatically refresh. My ring is my records. Then these blue, looks like bar charts are my signals, and then these are my insights. And my insights do have different colors to indicate whether or not it's been closed or whether or not it's been assigned to another task and things like that. Over here, I can see my latest insight, and then down here is my syslog, where I can see who's been making changes to things. Okay. Now, from an administrative perspective, I can look at my insights and see all my insights. And I can see that either in this list category, or I can see it in their status category, whether they're new or in progress or whatever. I can also look directly at my signals. I can also look directly at my entities. And I can look at my records. Now, in the case of records, remember, we're ingesting a lot of records. So this is one of those things that we're going to look at our record, but we're going to specify the name of that record or whatever we want. And then we can also, here's our content options. And again, I've got a lot more content options than you do. And here's our configuration options. And I've got a lot more configuration options than you do. Over here is my help. And if my help has a little red dot on it, and this is important, you'll see it on the test. If it has a little red dot on it, that means that we at Sumo have created a new announcement. Basically, remember, we maintain the rules. So every 2 weeks, we update the rules, or we update them sooner if something urgent happens. But you can, if you get that red dot, you'll see that red dot will lead you to announcements. And you can click on announcements and you can see what we've changed, what rules we've modified, what things we have done. Okay, so any rules that we create, we modify, we update, we keep fresh. Any rules you create, it's up to you to manage. Okay. Also, here's where I can get to my documentation. Here's where I can get to my API documentation, all of that good stuff. I can also see my status and my systems up and down, things along those lines. So what's happening here, that sort of thing. Now, also, this is where I can go back to my Sumo logic environment. By clicking on this, it will take me back to my Sumo, regular Sumo user interface. And then over here is where I can see who my user is that's logged in, who I'm logged in as, and my time zone. Okay. So that's from the user interface. By the way, if you want to go back to see that heads up display, go back to your home page. Over here on the far left corner is the Sumo icon. You click on it, and it will take you back to the home page here in your Cloud SIEM. Again, the purpose of the Cloud SIEM is to reduce fatigue here by ingesting all these records, turning these records into signals, turning these signals into insights, so we know what we need to focus on. And if we find an insight that we want to investigate, as you know from yesterday, in that insight, we will see the entity that it's surrounded by. In this case, Rico Dynamite, a username. And to the right of Rico Dynamite, you'll see there's 6 dots, 2x3 dot area. That's my context menu. I can click on that context menu and I can do some wide variety of things. Maybe I can look them up. I can do a who is. I can send the information to Sumo Logic Search and see if in my other logs there's other things in here. But you as an administrator can change that. You can customize this if you want. Additionally, you can assign this a status that you as the administrator can customize. So right now I have 3 statuses: in progress, don't use, and closed. Again, maybe we want to add another status. Maybe you've got a SOC SWAT team and you want to assign things to them. Up here under your actions, again, here is where I can do various things with this insight. Maybe I want to send it to my PagerDuty team. Maybe I want to send it to and write a JIRA ticket for it. But you and I, as administrators, can customize this. And that's one of the labs that we'll do today, is we'll add some actions in here that you and I can do. Okay. As far as this insight's concerned, I can see the severity score of it. I can see how many unique signals it is. And again, what generates an insight? An insight is generated by a correlation of signals. So these 4 signals, there are 4 signals in here. And what they share is they share the same user ID, Rico Dynamite. So these 4 events are sharing the same entity, in this case, Rico Dynamite. This one, when it hit the rule had a score of 4. So here I have somebody trying to use an AWS API call from a known threat, and that has a score of 4. This one down here, they tried to use an API call from a terminated Active Directory account. This one has a score of 6. 4 plus 6 is 10. This one down here, I've got somebody's trying to export out a bunch of credentials. That has a score of 2. Again, 4 plus 6 plus 2 is 12. And then this one down here has a firewall high severity alert. Somebody's trying to play with my firewall. This one has a score of 11, and I'm not sure how it can have a score of 11. The range should be from 0 to 10. Okay, so I've got to look into that. Bottom line is, this is all, when they add up, these numbers are greater. The total number of this insight is greater than 12. That's how the insight got generated. And for those of you with me yesterday, you know I can go in here and I can look at this and see what fields we've extracted and all that good stuff. Okay, and that's what we talked about in the regular class. Okay, Angel says, you know, it's bad if it's 11. You're absolutely correct, Angel. I'd like to know how it got to be 11 now. So that's a question for Peter, or maybe he knows. I thought the range is 0 to 10. Because that was a test question yesterday. All right, so I wanted to give you a little overview here into the interface. I want to go back again to my heads-up display, I click on this button in the upper left-hand corner. Any questions about the interface from an administrator's perspective? Okay, let's go back to our labs. And again, I want to get through this lab and then we'll take a break. So what we want to do is we want to do a lab 3. We did lab 2, right? We went and created our source, and there's some tricks and tips in here that you can use. But in lab 3, we want to send a log message to our Cloud SIEM. We're going to simulate this from the command line. So here in lab 3, we are going to open up some sort of a command line interface window, such as terminal or PowerShell. And we're going to type in this command, okay? So we're going to type in this command, only I'm going to swipe over it and I'm going to copy it. Now, there's a couple things we've got to do with this command. So I happen to be on a Mac. And so on my Mac, I'm going to run terminal. And here I am. Here's my prompt. I'm going to take this code. I'm going to paste it. Now, 2 things in this code I need to change. 2 things. And because I'm on a Mac, I have to use my arrow keys to arrow around. One of the things I want to change here is the attacker name. I want the double quotes, but I don't want this bracket and attacker name stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in here my initials, JWM, and I'm also going to get rid of that bracket. So we want you to change the attacker name to your initials. Could be 2 characters, 3 characters, whatever you want. So again, open up PuTTY, paste this code in, change the attacker name. The second thing we need to change is this last thing, the HTTP source URL. This curl command needs to know where to go, right? It needs the URL of where to go. If we go back into our Sumo logic environment, and if we go back into our actual, where our collectors are, so we go back to our continuous intelligence platform, and if we go into our collectors under manage data under collection, again, you want to find your collector. And so here is my collector that I created. Over here, there's an option that says show URL. I'm going to click on show URL. There is my URL. I want to take this URL. I want to copy it. And that is what I want to replace this HTTP source URL with. So I'm going to paste that URL in here. I'm going to paste that URL there. So how did I get back to the collector? Thank you, Michael, for asking. Okay.
Quick question.
Yep.
Do you need the brackets or not need the angle brackets? Because
You
looked like you.
Sorry, go ahead.
It looked like you kept the one on the end.
Okay, I'll fix it. Thank you. You shouldn't need the angle brackets. So if you're in Cloud SIEM, Michael, you're going to go here to Continuous Intelligence Platform. That's going to take you back to Sumo. In here, you're going to go to Manage Data in your navigation panel, and in Collection, and you're going to find your collector. And then you're going to click on Show URL for your collector. So Michael Wong, I hope that answers your question. Again, I'm saying your full name so that, again, I got a couple Michaels in this group. So just trying to be clear and precise. Now, back to this, somebody mentioned that I kept one of the right angle brackets. I don't see that I did.
Right at the tail end.
Oh, you're right, I did. Sorry about that. Thank you. Yeah, let me get rid of that. Sorry. Yep. I didn't see that there at the end. You're right, tail end. So when I do this, I'm going to run this and it just returns a prompt. Now, what I've done to this curl command is I have sent a message into my Sumo logic environment. Now, this message is coming from my home, my computer at my home in Bedford, New Hampshire. And my Sumo logic environment is part of the AWS cloud in Virginia. So it will take a minute to get there, okay? And that's something we have to be careful of. Okay, thanks. No problem, Peter. No problem. Okay. So what I'm going to do now and what I want to do is, remember we had our source category name. So back to my Sumo logic, back to my source here. If I go in and edit it, I see that I have my source name, source category. Okay. I'm going to copy that source category because what I want to do is I want to go back into my Cloud SIEM environment, I want to go up here to records and I want to find my record. Now, again, it doesn't show me all the records because there's just a ton of records, but I can, if I want to, specify either by source device or user, or in my case, if I look at metadata, under metadata, I have my source category. And so I'm going to choose under metadata source category, and I can say it is or is not, whatever. I'm going to use contains, and I'm going to paste in my source category that I created. And again, yours should also be training with your initials. And when I run this, I find there's my record. My record made it, but my record failed. Okay. The record failed, and it did. Absolutely, it failed. It failed because we didn't specify how to map the fields. We didn't do some other things. So this is actually expected. So in this lab, bear with me a second. In this lab, I think it's lab 3, we are going to send a test message and we're going to notice it failed. Okay. And so in lab 4 and 5, we're going to set up our mappings so it knows how to deal with this. And in lab 6, we're going to sit there and send this again. Okay. So I'd like to go ahead and get lab 4 and 5 and 6 done, so we get a successful message in here. Okay. Before I do that, I want to make sure we're all in good shape. We're all caught up. Everything's in fairly decent shape. Okay. So somebody asked the question here, is all Sumo structure hosted by AWS and aligned with AWS regions? Absolutely. Yeah, it is. We run on the cloud. We are a service in the cloud. We run on AWS. Absolutely. So. Sure. Hang on a second. Okay. Michael, your PowerShell CLI is entered. It's not working. Okay. Please, yeah, double check it if you would. And we'll see what we can do to try to help you out. Okay. Somebody asked me for the lab guide again, Aaron. So I just posted it up in the chat box. Should be good to go there. Now, any other questions here before I start with lab 4 and I fix things? Excellent. Aaron, good to know. So lab 4, what we want to do is we want to set up an ingestion mapping. We want to tell it what to do with this record, right? We're getting a record. It doesn't know what that log message is. It doesn't know what's going on, that sort of thing. So here, what we're going to do is we're going to go into our configuration. And in our configuration, we are going to choose Sumo Logic under integrations. So here under integrations, we're going to click on Sumo Logic. We're going to tell it, hey, prepare to receive a source. Okay. Prepare to receive a source. And so we're going to create this new ingestion mapping, because we don't just accept logs without saying we're supposed to get them. So I need to specify my source category. And again, I'm going to type in training and my initials, which is the name of my source category. And then under format, if I click on this, I should see some options. Our log, the information we're sending, is actually JSON. So the format of this is in JSON. Then we get to specify who the vendor and who the vendor is. And for the vendor, per the directions in the book, we simply want you to use vendor with your initials. Okay. So I'm going to type in here vendor with my initials. And then the product ID of the product is product with your initials. So vendor, vendor ID, all of that fun stuff.
John, there was a question about the break.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We're going to take a break here in just about 5 minutes. I'm sorry, guys. I'm running late. So thank you. Apologize for it, but we're running late. Okay. I'm going to let somebody put something in the Q&A box. I'll let Peter take care of that. You don't mind, Peter? So again, the event ID I'm going to leave alone. I do want to enable this, so I'm going to throw the enable switch on, and I'm going to go ahead and click create. That is now going to add my ingestion mapping. I've added a new ingestion mapping in here, and if I refresh it, I will see it. Now, that's one step. The other step we've got to do here, and by the way, that was lab number 4. In lab number 5, we need to tell it what fields to use. We need to set up the log mapping for this. So we're going to go back in here to content in lab 5. Excuse me, not content, configuration, configuration. And we're going to go on incoming data log mapping. Incoming data log mapping. And here I can see all the log mapping data, all the different mappings and stuff I've got going on, and all of that good stuff. And we're going to go ahead and create a new log map. Now, question, is the data you got coming in structured or is it unstructured? This happens to be structured JSON. So we're going to choose structured mapping and click create. And then under the name here, we're going to call this log mapping with your initials. And I would appreciate it if you would use the same name, log mapping with your initials, because I've eventually got to go in here and clean these out. Okay. And so what we're looking for here is when we get a log from a vendor, and that vendor, remember I mentioned I put in the previous configuration, my vendor, my initials, and a product of my product and my initials that has a format of JSON. And here's the tricky part. It says, and the event ID matches regex, okay? Per the directions, you want to type in a period and a star. So you want to type in a period and a star. That basically says the event ID matches anything. Okay. Now, over here, hang on a second. Record of type is going to be authentication, I believe. Actually, it's actually easier. Let me specify. Let me do the vendor piece first. So vendor, why is it not? Yeah. Oh, I see. I'm sorry. With vendor, there should be an option up here that says, I want to use matching values. There we go. When vendor matches input vendor and product matches input product. So you'll select that. That's the top option. And then here, this is going to be authentication, I believe. So record of type authentication with vendor matching input vendor, product matching input product. So basically what we're doing here is we're saying, look, we're looking for this information. And when we do, down below here, we're going to map some fields. So the field that's in the log record is called whatever, and we're going to map it to the metadata field that we want to use here. Now, if you're using field extraction rules, this is already done for you. But if we're not using field extraction rules, so this is why we have to do this. So as far as mapping our field, the input field is IP. So in the log, it's called IP. What we're going to do is we're going to call this device IP. And you see, I've got a long laundry list here. So I'm going to start typing in ahead here and I can pick device IP. And I want to map that. And I'm going to add a field. When I click add field, you'll see it took this mapping and put it down here. Then I'm going to add a second field. So here on page 13 of the PDF, the input field is called threat name. The output field is threat underscore name. So the other field that I want here is threat name, and it's camel case, THREAT, capital NAME, And then for my output field, again, I should have a pick list. If I start typing in threat, I see I can select threat name. So what we're doing is we're mapping the field from the log as it comes from the log into what we want to use here for metadata. And when I click add field, it now adds it down here. So I have added these two fields. And I'm going to click submit. And I've created my log mapping. And I can go back in here and look at my log mappings and see what's going on. Now, the next part of the exercise, and the last thing we're going to do before we go on break, is we're going to send another message. Same message, just another message. And for those of you who have, your command line interface, typically if you use an up arrow, it will retype in your message, repopulate it, and then you can hit the enter key and run it again. And this is, again, going to get in and it's going to get processed. And we're going to look at it right after the break. So I simply want you to run it again to make sure things work. Okay. And so let's take a 10-minute break and we will, let me clean up some things here real quick. And so when this timer gets down to 0, I'd like you to come back. Okay. So I'll see you back here in 10 minutes. Have a great break. Thanks. Hey, folks, welcome back. I hope you had a nice break. Got a chance to recharge the mugs and glasses, whatever, and do what you need to do. Again, before we left, we had set up a source in Sumo Logic to allow us to get a log message, and we sent a test message to that, or basically simulated sending a message to it, and we found it didn't go anywhere. It failed. And the reason it failed is because we had to tell it the data that was coming in. And then we also had to tell it how to map the fields. And so once we did that, we then sent another message. And now we want to see if it showed up. So again, I'm going to go here to records. And by the way, this is lab number 6, where we're going to check it out again. So here in lab 6, we sent the message. I'm going to go into metadata and I'm going to go into source category again. And I'm going to say contains, and I'm going to paste my training JWN. And I want to look and see what messages we've received. Now, notice this time it doesn't say failed. This time it received the message. And it says here, yeah, it came from device 127.0.0. And basically the string of information that we copied and pasted, it got. So it extracted my fields, it mapped my fields, shows me my vendor information, my product information. I can see what we mapped and all that fun stuff. And so now going forward, when I receive data from this source, I will just process it in and map those fields. So that's how that process works. Now, the only time you ever need to come in here to records is when you're trying to test to make sure your records are being ingested. So typically that's the use case for records. Any questions about that? Hopefully you're able to see your record. And, like I said, life is going well. And so that pretty much takes care of that part of the lab. So from an administrative perspective, we wanted to show you a couple things. How to ingest that data, okay? And so we sent that data, like I said, to Cloud SIEM. We realized we had to set up an ingestion mapping. We had to set up log mapping. But then we tested it again and checked it out, okay? And so there's our 10-minute break. Now, we want to change tacks a little bit here from administration. We want to talk about customizing and tuning our Cloud SIEM environment. So from an administrative perspective, we want to do a couple more things. We mentioned yesterday that we have got these things called rules, right? We got a whole bunch of built-in rules that Sumo Logic provides. It's part of the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And we maintain and update these rules. So as the rules change, or if there's a new threat, we'll add a new rule, that sort of thing. But you can create your own rules. So the Cloud SIEM rule is logical code that deploys based on scanning the incoming records. And if the record matches the rule fires and it's going to generate a signal. Okay. So you can create custom rules. Now there are 4 types of custom rules, 4 types. There's a match rule, and we actually did this in the class yesterday. There's a threshold rule, which we're going to do a lab on this just a second. So we can create a threshold rule, which we'll show you how to do that. A good example here is that I want to see at least 5 failed login attempts under an hour. Now, again, a threshold rule is matching based on a given condition. I'm sorry. Yeah, threshold rule is matching based on a given condition of count. Your match rule is based on a simple Boolean condition. That condition is either true or false. Third type of rule we have is a chain rule, where we can combine 2 or more events in a given time frame. So maybe I had 5 failed login attempts followed by a successful attempt within an hour. That's a chain rule. And then, of course, there's also an aggregation rule. So I want to aggregate records to see what's going on. So I may want to see the activity from a single IP address in under an hour, all the different connection attempts. So I can basically see what's going on. So these are rules that you and I can write. Okay. Now, question, does a SOC analyst write these rules? Does an administrator write these rules? It depends. It depends on the company and that sort of thing. A tier 3 SOC analyst might, but again, maybe a tier 1 can only write a match rule or something. So it depends on how things are set up. So what we're going to do in the next two labs is we're going to write some rules. So in lab number 7, we're going to write a threshold rule. And in lab number 8, we're going to write a chain rule. So let's do lab number 7 first. Again, I'm going to go back to my Cloud SIEM environment. If I want to go back to my home, I can. I don't need to. But here under content is where my rules are. Now, hang on a second. I think I'm logged in here as interesting. Hold on a second. There we go. I expect to see more options for me. Okay. I expect to see more than rules and rule tuning and all that sort of thing. So here under content, under rules is where we have all of our built-in rules. And as I said, all the built-in rules that we at Sumo Logic create, we update, we manage, we take care of, all that good stuff. But what we're going to do is we're going to create some additional rules. And we recommend that before you create your rules, number one, you check and see if there's an existing rule for it. If there's an existing rule, you don't need to create it, right? We also suggest that you understand your appetite for risk and adversity, right? Some things your company's probably very sensitive about, and therefore you want to make sure that that is well covered in rules. Whenever we create a rule, we always want to mark it as a prototype. We talked about that yesterday, and I'll talk about that again today for those of you who weren't here yesterday. But a prototype basically says the rule can generate signals, but it will not be used to generate an insight. So as I'm testing these rules to check and make sure that they're right and they're behaving correctly, and I don't want to fire off a bunch of insights and cause my SOC analyst extra work where I'm testing something, that checking the prototype negates that. And we always recommend that you do that. We always recommend you check the prototype. So here in rule 7 or lab 7, excuse me, we're going to click create, and we're going to choose threshold rules. So we're going to grab ourselves a threshold rule. We're going to click create. And the first thing we're going to do is give this thing a name. So I want you to put your initials in there, and I want you to put the word threshold rule. Now, why do I want you to do this? Because later on today, after class, I've got to go in and find all these rules, and I've got to scrape them out. And it's easier for me to find if you use the same words that I did, threshold rule. Your initials, threshold rule. Just makes it easy. Okay. So this rule consists of the logic that's going to cause it to trigger, and then what the signal is that's going to be generated. And then down here, I can mark it as a prototype. Down here, you'll see in the bottom, there's this golden triangle, and this golden triangle is really helpful. Anything I've admitted, forgotten, whatever, it will remind me, and I won't be able to submit this until I clear up the stuff that's in this golden triangle. So what I want to do is I want to write my expression. And per the directions in the book, I want to, in my threshold rule, the expression I'm going to do is I'm going to look for a specific metadata device for this threshold rule. So I'm going to copy this in here, and I'm going to paste it. Now, when I paste it, things are not right. And the reason things are not right is we took it out of a text editor, and that text editor did not make traditional single flat quotes. It made smart quotes. So if we retype these single quotes, now everything's in good shape. And here, when we use literal strings in this tool, we use single quotes. So what we're looking at is we're looking to see if the metadata device event ID is this code. And then we're going to define whether or not, how many times it matches it within a certain period of time. And again, per the direction, we want to see matches the record with 3 distinct values. So if I go over here and I click 3, okay. Now the question is, where's this distinct value stuff come in from, right? If I, hang on a second, under show advanced, here's where I can specify I want to do it with distinct values. So I open up advanced, and I can say I want to see distinct values. So now it matches records with 3 distinct values for fields device IP. So here I can select the specific device I'm looking for, the specific field I'm looking for. So now it's looking for, from a device IP field, it's looking for this event ID. And then I can specify the time frame, which it wants me to grab within 1 hour. Within 1 hour. So I have defined the logic that's going to cause this to generate a signal. Now down here, you'll notice it says add tuning expression. Talked about this yesterday. Rule tuning expressions are used to create exceptions to rules if we want to. And we can apply rule tuning expressions to as many rules as we want to. So maybe, for example, your SOC team who's testing this, you want to exempt their particular IP address or their particular username or something like that. You can create a rule tuning expression to do that. And again, we talked about that in the Cloud SIEM fundamentals class. Now over here, what entity am I dealing with? And again, I believe I'm dealing with device IP. So let me make sure I've got that right. Yep, device IP. And then here with summary, I can put in whatever I want. So we can specify that we found suspicious event ID, suspicious. So, suspicious event ID, sorry. Okay. All right, we can put in whatever we want to in the summary. We can put in whatever we want in the description. And notice as I'm doing this, that these golden triangle is starting to clear away. So again, I could put the same information here. And then here's where you give it that score. So here, when I throw this switch, it can go from 0 to 10. And so again, how much of a concern is this, right? If that device ID represents a serious malicious file and stuff like that, I might want to score it a bit higher. If it's not a big deal, it's some sort of a, I won't say malicious files are little, but some sort of a little known threat, then I could score it a little lower. So you decide what score you want to give it. And then in here, you add whatever technique and tags you want that's associated with the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So, and that's typically how the rules get named, is based on this MITRE ATT&CK framework. So let's go ahead and make this discovery. And again, I could add other tactics and techniques as I want to. Now, always make these rules a prototype. Check mark this, because when this rule fires, it will not accidentally generate any insights. It'll generate the rules, and it'll fire them, generate signals, but it won't generate any insights. Now, after you've tested this and you're happy with it, then you can go back in here and clear that check mark. And then it will generate insights. But you always want to test it first, and you always want to make sure it's marked as a prototype. So now when I click submit, I have now added this new rule. And I will be able to see over time when this rule is being used or when it's being activated. So let me go back here for a second and show you rules. And if I look at some other rules, Active Directory spray password accounts, here we go. I can see that this particular activity has been found in our training environment pretty regularly across the various months. Now, we simulate some data in here to create some threats, abnormalities, and stuff like that. Otherwise, we wouldn't have anything really to talk about. So that is creating a threshold rule. Any questions? By the way, if I want to here, I can go in here and sort. I can sort by when it was created. Right now, it's sorting it in ascending order. I want to click on it again to sort it in descending order. So my latest ones are first. And now I can see all the great threshold rules you guys have created. And somewhere in here is mine. By the way, I can disable these if I want to. I can also throw them away. For these rules, I can also export them as JSON, and I can import them back in as JSON if I need to, as far as creating rules. So that brings us to our next lab, lab number 8, where we get to write a chain rule. And so we're going to write a chain rule that, again, we're going to go up here, create. This time it's chain. We're going to click create. The name, again, my initials, your initials, and I'm going to call this chain rule. Okay. Now, a chain rule has certain expressions, and I can have as many expressions as I want. But one thing happens, followed by another thing happen within a certain period of time. So here, what we're looking at is we want to have when 10 records match this expression. So I'm going to take this code here. I am going to copy it and say when, and I can up arrow, or I can go in here and just swipe over and say, and 10. And here in my expression, I can paste this in. Now, besides pasting this in, if you wanted to, if I get rid of all this, just give me a second here, I'm backspacing. I could start typing in the fields, and I could start seeing the various fields and build this expression. So you don't always have to copy and paste, all right? And then true and false are actual Boolean values that don't require any single quotes. We're in good shape. So here I'm looking to see that they were unsuccessful in logging in. Then I want to see that they were successful in logging in. One match. They were successful in logging in, and I want to do this within the exact order within 5 minutes. So as I scroll down here a little bit, I can specify in any order or exact order, and again, I can specify the time. Okay, so this is the logic that's going to cause this to fire. And then as before, I can specify my entity, which again, my entity here is going to be device IP. So it's going to say this particular IP address. It pulls out the device IP. Maybe I want to extract the username instead, but we'll go with device IP. And then possible brute force attack. Somebody wasn't able to log in 10 times, and then they suddenly were able to log in. That could be a possible brute force attack. And again, I can put in my description here. Type in anything you want. That's what the user is going to see when they see the signal. And again, you can give this thing a score. And again, you can add the MITRE ATT&CK framework, what you want to see. And all we have to do is mark this as a prototype, click submit. And again, we have added this particular rule as well. So adding rules is really not terribly difficult. And again, we can see if that rule has been found and being used or not. Again, I can disable this rule if I want to. And of course, I can go back to seeing all of my rules and look at them and see how they're being used. Okay. Now, there's one more thing we're going to talk about in this class, and that's customizing certain things. So in lab 9 here, under my configuration button, you'll notice here that you can customize your content actions, you can customize your actions, you can customize your statuses, your resolutions, all of that sort of stuff. So in our case, we're just going to show you an example of one, but let me put this into proper context. If I go back to my home, the only place you see your actions button is when you are looking at an insight. So when I click on any insight at all, the user interface, I'm sorry, let me go into that insight. The user interface is going to have this actions button in here. And you and I can customize this actions button. You and I can also, as I said before, take this context menu that's right there and we customize that. We can customize our statuses. We can customize our various fields and stuff, again, through the configuration if you have rights. Now, you guys, I believe, only have rights to actions. So if we go in here to configuration and actions, here are the various actions that we have. And if you want to, in lab 9, we can create a new action so that we're going to go in here and hit create. And our action is going to be, again, your initials along with custom action. Now, when do I want this custom action to be available? When we create an insight, when we close an insight, on demand, when we're offline, when the sensor is offline, when when the role is automatically disabled. So you can pick when you want this to happen. What we want to do is we want to select on demand here. Let's make it available all the time. We want to make this available. And then here, what do we want to use? Do we want to use AWS's simple notification service? We want to use Demento, email. These are some of the things we've got basically built in here. I want to send it to PagerDuty, Slack, whatever. What do we want to do? In my case, I'm going to create an email. And who do I want this to go to? So I can type in my email address, or I could do something like soc@sumologic.com. Probably don't want to do soc@sumologic.com, as that will send it to our SOC team. But you can send it, and define who you want it to go to, pure and simple. And then you click create, and then it's going to be available. So just for fun here, I will then put in my email address. And I will click create. And so now this has been added. And now if I go into an insight, any insight, and I look at that insight, here under the actions button, I see JWM custom action. And if I click on JWM custom action and I execute this, it's going to send me an email. Pure and simple of this information. So that's how you and I can modify this. Additionally, like I said, you can also go in here to statuses, and you could add another status if you want to create a status. Maybe you've got a custom SWAT team that you want to assign it to. Maybe you're going to send it out to a contractor. You can add statuses and add those into your statuses. You can go in here, like I said, and you can also add and modify your context actions. So lots of things that we can do, you can do in here with regards to this. And if you want to know how to do some of that stuff, again, I would encourage you to check out our documentation. Okay. So if we go in here to our product documentation, here's all the various information and stuff. And you can, create context actions. How do you do that? What do you need to do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what questions have you? Sounds like we're all in decent shape. Hopefully we've done all the labs now. Fatine, I see that you, oh, I see. So no, she didn't have the ability to talk. I was going to enable you, but you're running an older version of Zoom, so can't really do that very easily. Again, if you got any questions, feel free to let us know, but that's going to pretty much wrap it up for us. So let me just jump down here and let's talk about taking the certification exam. So in order to take the certification exam, what I need you to do is I need you to log out of our training environment. Why do I want you to log out of our training environment? It's really quite simple. So here I want to go back to, here I want to go back to my Sumo Logic environment. And down here, you'll notice that you're logged in as training plus admin with some crazy number. So if training plus admin takes that test and passes it, training plus admin gets the credit. You don't. We want to make sure you're logged in with your name. So for that reason, we want you to go into here, find that training plus admin account, sign out. And then you're going to go into your company's Sumo Logic environment. Now, your company does not need to have Cloud SIEM to access the exams. You don't need to do that. You simply need to log into your company's environment with your login credentials. And then, for those of you who've been with me the last day or two, you know that you can click on Home. you can click on certification. You can click on get certified. And for those of you with me the last 2 days, there was a little issue that we worked through to get through this. Those of you who've not been to a class yet, this is your first certification. When you click on get certified, it may do something like this and take you back to the home page. It's not taking you to the certification area. And it's actually not a bug, it's actually a feature. We at Sumo Logic will not move you from one environment to another without your permission, okay? So in order to get that permission, what we need to do is we need to click on help. We need to click on community. And for those of you who have this issue, a pop-up panel will appear, okay? Said, I don't have this pop-up panel. I saw this about 2 years ago, so I don't have this issue. But there's a pop-up panel that appears, which has a button that says verify email or allow or agree or whatever. You click on it, send email, whatever. In a few minutes, you'll get an email from Sumo Logic. In the body of that email is another button. Click on that button, and now you have given us permission to move you from one environment to another. Now, when you click on home, and you click on certification, and you click on get certified, it's going to take you to our learning management system, another Sumo Logic environment, okay? Now, before I get into this, oh, good. Okay, I see they've added this recorded train. This is probably where we're going to put all of our slides and recordings and labs right here, okay? By the way, this area over here is our self-paced courses. So if you want to, you can go to our self-paced courses. And by the way, here's where you can also see the various passwords. When we change them, we update that page. But here under security is where you can see we've got the Cloud SIEM administration self-paced course. So if you've got any colleagues that want to take this, or you want to take the Cloud SIEM fundamentals class, you weren't there yesterday, you can walk through it. Same material, just all self-paced. And again, it's absolutely free, my favorite price. All right, let me go back here a couple of pages to back here to the root page of this. To get certified and to take your exam, you click on Get Certified. Now, before I click on Get Certified and play with this exam and all that stuff, I want to show you something. Up here in the upper right-hand corner, this is where your profile is. And if you want to, you can add your picture to your profile. You don't have to, just do whatever. And here's where you can see when you took exams and when you passed these exams, okay? So you can see the various exams, and you can see basically what's going on. Now, I will mention to you that a couple of you have discovered and pointed out to us that when you take and pass the exam, it's telling you your exam loses its certification in 30 days rather than a year. We're going to work on that. We made this available and made this point to our certification manager, and I know what's going on, and we'll get it resolved one way or the other. By the way, any exams that you've taken and passed, you can also view the certificate. So you can print this out, screen capture this, whatever. Because again, if you want that Uber Eats voucher that we're offering, you'll send us a copy of that certificate, and you'll send that email to training-promotions@sumologic.com. And don't worry, I'll type that in just a minute. So I'll type it in the chat box to make it easy for you. And then here is where you can also add it to your LinkedIn profile if you want to. Okay. So trying to make it very easy for you. Now, there's a reason why I showed you this, and it's not just because to show you how many nifty certifications I have. That's not the point at all. So back to my exams. If I click on SIEM, it filters me for the Cloud SIEM exams. And I'm gonna, what you would normally do, and what I want you to do at some point, not right this second, is click on this Cloud SIEM administration exam. And you'll notice that you get to register for it. And the registration is absolutely free. So you click on this button, and as you can see, I'm registered. I'm done. That's it. Finito. Good. I'll get an email, but that's fine. Then I can start this exam. I can click start here, or I can click before you start, either one. And it tells me that there are 20 questions. I've got 60 minutes to complete it. By the way, Peter, thank you for your help. Appreciate all your help. Have a great day. Able to navigate through. It's open book, open note. I will be here. Odell will be here to answer any questions you get stuck on. We'll try to help you out. Passing score is 70. not 75. Usually for us, most exams it's 75. Most exams have 30 questions. This is a new exam. We're trying to be gentle. When we click next, that takes us actually to the exam. Now, again, I didn't necessarily want you to follow along, but if you did follow along, hold right here. Don't click, don't do anything just yet. Got 20 questions, 60 minutes, how many attempts I want to take. When I'm ready to take it, here I go. So it says, select the wording that completes this correctly. For Cloud SIEM to map messages from Sumo logic, a valid ingest mapping must be enabled for the source category for the incoming messages. Okay, I believe that's the correct answer. Then I click next and it gives me the next question here. So match the action in the correct URI to do this. So forward, right? This is in which user interface is this in? This is in my collector configuration. Assign my role-based access controls. This is in my users and roles. Send custom alerts from insights. That's actually under actions in Cloud SIEM. And then parse my records, all that stuff. So I have answered 2 questions. And to tell you the truth, I've had enough. So if you don't mind, I'm going to scroll down here a little bit. And I want to submit my answers. Now, obviously, I'm not going to pass. I only answered 2 questions, right? But I want to show you something. So when I submit my answers, it says I did not pass, but I can see what questions I got right. I can see what questions I got wrong. But most importantly, there's this submit results button. Okay. When you pass, and hopefully you will, I'm pretty confident you will, please click the submit results button because then it writes it to your profile and then you'll have a certificate. You'll be able to add it to your LinkedIn profile. If you don't click this button, as far as the system's concerned, it didn't pass. So your profile is kind of in a different area of this. And so you need to click this so it writes it to your profile. And that's why I wanted to show you this. So please hit that submit results button. If for some reason you didn't hit that submit results profile button, if you go back into this exam, you should see that button. You should be able to click on it. You should be able to, submit it. Okay. If you don't pass the exam, I'm not terribly worried if you do hit that button or not, although I do believe that in order to get another chance at the exam, you do need to click that button. And do what you need to do. So are there any questions about how to get to the exam? All right. In that case, I am going to do 2 things. One, I'm going to thank you all for attending. I realize for many of you, it's been a long week. We've been together Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, 3 hours a day. So appreciate all your hard work and efforts. Hope you learned a lot about Sumo. And we hope to see you in class again real soon. So otherwise, I am going to stop my video. I'm going to stop my screen share. I'm going to stop the recording. And you all have a great day. Again, I encourage you to take the exam now while we're here. Odell and I can help you. But if you've got to go to other meetings or other things, I certainly understand that. I will put in the chat box the email address to send the copy of your certificates to get those Uber Eats vouchers. So you get a $15 Uber Eats voucher if you take the exam now and pass it. And off we go to the races. So thank you all very much. Please have a wonderful week. Please be safe.